Welcome to GlitchCube, we're a gaming podcast, and each week we take a deeper look into the art of video games. I'm Christian.
I'm Chris.
And today we are so excited to have the lovely, the talented Miss Fraya Love with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Fraya. It really means the world to us. You have no idea how excited we are.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so for the audience out there who's been living under a rock and don't know who you are, do you want to give us a brief little rundown of who you are and what you do?
I am Fraya Love, and I'm not only is that my drag name, but it's a name of a character that I use in Queens of Adventure, which is a storytelling comedy podcast that kind of runs off the basis of D&D. So we use D&D as our map, and then we tell a fun little story through that.
Sweet. Awesome. So that kind of brings me into the start of it. So with D&D, I mean, I've been an avid listener of Queens of Adventure since like the beginning. I've actually been chatting on your Discord for a while, and I kept trying to get you guys down here to San Diego, but it just couldn't happen for a while.
And the pandemic, you know.
Yeah, that definitely changes the world, right? So before the show, did you play D&D, or what was your like intro to it?
Absolutely not. Queens of Adventure was my intro to Dungeons and Dragons. I've seen friends play it before. It just seemed way too difficult and way too mechanical. I didn't understand it at first, so I saw it and I was just like, maybe it's not for me. And I was asked to do, going back to the very beginning, when I got a message from a friend of mine who isn't Matt or James, because I didn't meet them yet, or anyone else in the cast. So like we were all friends, but they hadn't messaged me. I got a message from a friend of mine named Butch Alice, who is a writer, director, and producer of theater here in Seattle. And they were like, hey, a friend of mine is doing this show. I just thought it was a straight drag show. A show about like D&D stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. And like in my head, I was thinking like, okay, so just do a couple of numbers that, you know, wear a warrior costume and do something, you know, that, do a song that happens to like sound like that, or, you know, wear some sort of like wizard-esque type of costume and go that route. And then I got a message from Matt asking to like take a call and like talk to him. And I was like, sure, buddy. Like, it's just a drag show, but like, sure, if you want to have like a whole conversation about it, absolutely. This is your show. I'm just a part of it. So he calls me a couple of weeks later and he starts explaining to me, and I'm just like, oh, like this isn't like a lip syncing drag show performance. This is like a full on like tabletop gaming show that is with drag queens. Okay. And at the time, it wasn't called Queens of Adventure. We hadn't come up with that name, or they hadn't come up with that name yet. It was just Dungeons and Drag Queens.
Right. So, you mentioned,
very long explanation. Sorry.
No, you're totally fine. That's great, because you mentioned like you wanted to just dress up as like a warrior or wizard, right? Keep it simple, but you picked a race that is not very typical of first timers or all that. You picked the water Hennessy, I believe, right?
Yes, I didn't know. I'm also Mexican, so a G at the beginning. I was like, I don't know how to, like, it sounds like Genesee. How do we? Okay, Genesee. We get to the Hennessy. We're just gonna call it Hennessy. And at the moment, I was a big drinker. So Hennessy worked. And I did pick it because I picked the water cleric, not really thinking about the cleric part, but mostly just the water elemental part. And when I got into like the real of like how not the mechanics, but like how that race works, the elementals in general, like it was kind of, it was very fitting because if you look into D&D Beyond, or like if you have any of the handbooks, they're not a very well-treated race. They're kind of looked down upon and things like that. So I found it very fitting that I chose the elementals. I chose water because I'm a Cancer and I love water. That's not because I'm a Cancer, I like water, but I also grew up in a beach city in Southern California. I'm from Oxnard.
Oh, nice.
Ventura County, if you're not familiar. So it just kind of worked, and I was a big fan of Avatar, so I was just like, oh, hell yeah. That's awesome.
Right. You get to be a blue, like, vicious warrior. It's great, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yes.
then, of course, you got to try and shape water for everything. So, yeah.
Can I shape water for
Yeah.
that?
Which I love. I love the little tropes that have kind of become staples for the show. And I love, like, listening to you figuring out the show and figuring out your character as it progressed, right? And it was
Hmm.
such a cool thing to see, like, when you first get your deity share. Like, I love, like, you can tell, like, you're just like, share. Like it just was like second nature, just kind of like, this, it has to be this, right? So I love those little, like, bits and pieces to it. Now, the show itself, yes, it uses the D&D system, but you guys do a lot of audience participation in it, which I think is a great way of incorporating for live shows. So was that Matt's idea? Was that kind of like a joint thing, or?
That was definitely Matt's idea.
Okay.
So, again, I came into it not knowing absolutely anything. So the first time that I played D&D, was we just kind of sat around at like Matt and James's apartment, and we did like a quick, like, all
Okay.
right, here's like just a whatever run, like just so that you can get comfortable and understand the mechanics of D&D. And then the second time, I think the second time was our first recorded session. I'm not sure if it's in Legends or not. Like, it might be somewhere in between.
It wasn't Wonder Bread? No, that was.
It was before. It wasn't
Okay.
that, because the Wunderbread Manor was the first live show.
Got it. Okay.
But we had, I don't even know if they ever used it, that at all. I was also really baked at the time. I was super baked during the session, so I can't even remember what exactly happened. But it was the second time that we did it, just to like, it was the just to get really familiar with it, and then we did the show, which was the Wunderbread Manor.
Mm-hmm.
And the live mechanics, that was all Matt and James. Matt and James. So what they do is they hand off, and I think the participants paid for it in advance. So the tickets were this much or this much if you want to have, the paddles. And it was plus or minus, I guess, inspiration points, or just plus or minus points in general. So if you think we're doing too good, and we roll even, a great roll, and we hit a crit or whatever, someone can like use up their paddle and go like -1.
Yeah.
And
Which
like audience
did.
members can, which they do. Most of the time we get like the pluses.
Yeah.
But like, you got to throw a monkey wrench in there somewhere, right?
Right. It's more fun that way. Yeah. So with you mentioned, or you touched on the idea of representation in games, and that's what kind of originally drew you to the Genesee or the Hennessy clan, right? That race. We actually just did a episode recently talking about representation in video games and how it's kind of evolving over time and becoming more prominent in a way. What's your take on that? Do you feel like we're moving in the right direction? Are we not moving fast enough? Like, what?
I mean, in general, I don't think anyone's ever moving fast enough. We could have been far, far along in some other timeline in another completely different universe. But I mean, like, as far as like games go, like I, in the last month, just realized that they had setups for people who have color blindness. Like, I bought Mortal Kombat a month or so ago, like 2 months ago, started playing that, and it had asked like, hey, what color set works for you? And I was like, oh, I'd never thought of it. I'm not colorblind. I don't think of these things. So it's kind of awesome that they're doing things like that. As far as queer representation, there could absolutely be so much more, especially when it comes to trans individuals. Because I mean, like in Mortal Kombat, we can just be like, oh yeah, Sub-Zero's gay, whatever. Like that could be your own thing for yourself. But like there are so many facets to trans and non-binary people. I, being a trans woman, there are people who are just non-binary. There are people who are trans but no op. There are people who are trans and choose to do certain operations, not all. And there's a huge spectrum of color, if you will, that isn't necessarily being represented. And it's really cool that in certain games, I believe Skyrim is one of them, where you can create your character. And tons of other games that are like that, but there are still not exactly all 100% options that can make you help see yourself in this video game, even though it's like imaginary. But you kind of want to add those elements and aspects to be able to visually represent yourself as best as possible in a video game,
right,
or board game.
Very true. Right. Yeah, the character creator in D&D is definitely a huge one to basically just put yourself in the game, and just character generators in general allow you to do that. So you can just create such an immersive environment for yourself and put your own mindset into these game rules, so you can kind of become that warrior of light, right? And be the champion of your own story, or go through these ordeals that you wouldn't deal with on your own day-to-day lives. Or it might even put you in the shoes of someone else, right, inadvertently. Like there's certain games like we mentioned before, that we talked about Gone Home in the past, or Night in the Woods, that have characters in which you can directly relate with, and it puts you into their stories of their own personal depressions or things like that. And for people who haven't dealt with those things, they can kind of get a small glimpse into it, and maybe hopefully get like a better understanding. Of course, like just seeing it is way different than living through those hardships and ordeals, but getting some sort of like familiarity with it definitely does help, which is, it's a nice aspect to it. So hopefully we can kind of keep going with that in the future of gaming, but we'll see where it goes from there. It is kind of becoming more common trope to have those proper representations in gaming, which it is great to see. And we've talked about D&D a lot, but D&D actually just changed out a lot of their rule sets and how races, well, quote unquote races, are classified, right? It's no longer race. It's based off of, you can change it up based off of your own upbringing, right? So, which I think is fantastic. And there's just so much to that, and I just get lost in those kind of like trains of thoughts with those things. So I also like to rant as well. So welcome to the show. Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. It's
Chris knows
part of what I do.
all too
Also,
well.
I totally apologize. I'm sitting here like effing with my little headphones.
Yeah. Oh, you're fine.
So I'm just sitting here like detangling them as we're talking. So I completely apologize. I am not actually distracted.
No, you're good. You're good. Don't worry. There's no, I keep having my cats over here trying to get my attention and trying to knock over my camera. So that's my own personal distractions. But
fair enough.
Yeah. As far as like one interesting thing that I heard when it comes to D&D, and maybe you've heard about this from fans or whatnot, is that a lot of DMs or newer or older players now who are part of the LGBTQ community, they actually had same-sex relationships in D&D before they had them in real life. And that was kind of like their way of coming out to the table and then getting comfortable with that idea and then eventually coming out to the world. I think that's a beautiful thing, and like it's a great way of figuring it out. But what do you feel about that? Like using a game to kind of get comfortable with those ideas?
I think it's a great idea. I think it's something that, if you're not 100% sure, I mean, obviously, I'm just going to go with the trope of like, do whatever you need to do to stay safe. So if it's not coming out until like you move out of your house, move out of your city, move out of your country, do what you need to do to keep yourself safe. But as far as like testing the waters, I think it's a great idea. If you're not 100% sure, but you absolutely feel like you need to come out, it's a great way to just be like, hey, even if it's not even just your character, just a complete, NPC, like, oh yeah, these two NPCs are holding hands, just to see the reaction of the table. I think it's a great idea, and people should do it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot, actually, using the idea of the NPCs to kind of tell the story too, kind of gauge the table and get people more comfortable with the idea, so then you can get comfortable with it yourself. Like that's a good way of testing it. I didn't think about that. That's nice. So your show for sure is it gets a little crazy and hectic and a little out there sometimes, right? You guys go pretty far. I mean, your spiritual weapon is a dildo, right? Like, so I mean,
that is
that's right. It's arson.
It's arson.
Yeah,
Arsons is a Hitachi vibrator.
Yeah.
That was given to them by Samantha from Sex and the City.
That's right. That's just the show. If you guys haven't listened to the show yet, definitely check it out. It's amazing. There's so much to it. It's a beautiful thing. But so there are some common tropes as far as like safety measures of what people are comfortable with. Like, how do you guys gauge that in the audience? Or like, oh God, did we go too far? Right.
I mean,
they are going to a drag show, so I'm assuming
yeah,
that they should be a little
there's
bit more
always that
open.
like like if you're going to a drag show, always understand that there's a headspace. But I think that as far as like me, London, Arson, and Butaline are pretty much aware, and this is just like a small amount of the cast, but we're more for the most part the main cast. Also including Harlot, who was a huge part of the very beginning of the show.
Yeah.
We're very socially aware. And even if like one of us said a joke that was a little too colorful or off, like you can know. It's kind of like when you're a comedian, like you start, you dip your toe in, and then you either realize that you've gone too far or that it wasn't funny. And then you switch it up, and you go with the flow. But I don't, as far as we're concerned, like we've never really had an issue with it.
Okay, nice. So I'm going to jump around a little bit here because I'm actually really curious about like your original start to just drag in general. Like what got you into it? What made you make that leap? And like how nerve-wracking was your first like maybe live show or first like experience with it compared to now, like whenever you're interacting with like the audience and whatnot?
Are we talking about D&D or drag?
Just drag in general. Just all
drag in general.
Yeah.
So when I started, I was just cross-dressing once a week. In good old like a little beach town, like a little Mexican beach town in Southern California. Just kind of going out every so often, figuring things out until the first time that I stepped on stage as a drag queen. I'm an actor and singer by trade, but for fun, mostly for theater. I act now, but I don't sing anymore. I was a singer, dancer, actor back in high school. I went, it followed me into college, a little bit into adulthood. So it was, being on stage is comfortable for me. I like having that audience interaction. It's fun. It's great. It's energizing. The first time, obviously it was very nerve-wracking because it was a new medium. It wasn't, okay, you've been practicing this role for X amount of, weeks or months, and you're gonna play it to the best of your ability. No, it's, you just learned how to do makeup for drag, and you have been sort of listening to this song in like on your headphones for the last 3.5 hours, really trying to get those words down just to make sure that you have it, and stepping onto a stage with 5.5-inch heels where you're wobbling around like a newborn gazelle, and all you can really muster up is to like shake around a little bit and mumble watermelon bubblegum the entire time, so while your dress starts falling off, which is exactly what happened to me. To now, which I can run around, spin, and do all the things. And there was a time where I was a Madonna and Lady Gaga impersonator for about 3.5 years. I've traveled basically around the United States, up and down the West Coast mostly. And I've probably worked in every single bar in Seattle. If I wasn't a part of the cast, I was there a good amount of times. So like it's it's been awesome. A journey.
Yeah, that's great. Wow. I didn't know that about like the Lady Gaga stuff and all that. That's really cool. And I could totally see it. That makes total sense.
More Madonna than Lady Gaga. It takes a lot more makeup to look like Lady Gaga than Madonna, because Gaga's face is very long and narrow, but I look spitting image like the queen herself.
Do you put on the British accent when you do Madonna when you go out there? No,
the fake British accent? Yeah, absolutely.
Fake, come on. That's legit. Everyone gets an accent when they move away. It's perfectly normal.
Exactly.
That's great. So, sorry. Now, with COVID and everything going on, there's obviously not too many live shows and whatnot. So what are you doing now to kind of keep that like energy going for you?
Well, I've transitioned from doing stage to commercials, TV, and film. I've
Oh, cool.
just started getting my start about a year and a half ago. So, doing as much as I possibly can to get booked. Obviously, just starting, it's a little bit more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I kind of did to keep that going. I was already starting to transition towards the end of 2019 into basically COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we'll see where this goes.
Yeah, that's exciting. I mean, you have so much talent and just a charisma about you. There's no way that they can't take you. So you're definitely going to be getting on that big screen pretty damn soon. So I'd be very surprised if you don't. Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. So now you also do Twitch, right? So
Yes.
yeah, awesome. So can you tell us about that experience with you? How is it interacting with a chat room rather than, people screaming your name and all that?
It's mildly different, but yet oddly similar.
Mhm.
It took a second to get used to because I started on James's channel, which is pretty pixel.
Mhm.
And in my head, because I didn't realize that all they were really kind of doing was just kind of setting me up to have my own channel and my own thing. They're like, all right, cool, here's our audience. Now go run, child, into the wild and do this on your own. So they taught me the basics. I'm like not technologically inclined. I'm basically your 70-year-old grandmother when it comes to technology. I'm just like, I don't know how it works. I should know because I grew up with it, but like for me, I'm so like I don't like having things to constantly like obviously I was late to this and I completely forgot. So like things that are like constantly like right in front of my face, I'm just like I can't do this. It's way too much stimulation. So when something new comes out, I'm just like, I'll give it a second and I'll slowly learn it.
Mhm.
Where did we go? Oh yeah, Twitch. So interacting with the audience on Twitch versus the live audience, I feel like it's a little bit more personable because you can talk to individuals. And James taught me this, where when you see a name come up, always talk about, if someone's asking a question, you say, hey, user 1284,
Mhm.
here's what you asked, and here's my answer.
Mm.
Because you have a bit more of a connection with your audience, and you can talk to them by username,
Mhm.
but by name,
Right.
for the most part. And you can have a personal conversation with them. You see them, in my case, once a week. Every Thursday from 9:30 a.m. to about 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time,
The shameless plug.
unless I'm
Yeah.
busy. Um, and you get to just talk with them. You have your own inside jokes. Like my dog is a huge part of my
Oh yeah, that your
Twitch
adorable
stream.
puppy is all
Yes.
over you in those streams. Yeah.
I feed him and I do all the things. I'm still getting to like that point again, not technologically inclined. I need to figure out how to put music and prompts on all those things. Just having a Nightbot in general was someone showed me how to do that, and I was like, okay, step 1, I have a Nightbot. Step 2, do all the fun bells and whistles, which it's on my list.
I find it really like admirable of you to just kind of jump in without being fully comfortable with everything and not having all that stuff set out and laid out already. Like I'm such a like opposite when it comes to that. Like when it comes to setting up like Chris, we have another show that we want to build up, and it like I'm like, okay, well we need transition audio, we need an intro, we need this, like we need to get a few shows under our belt, we need idea before we even start posting one. I don't like it's like we're not putting it out to the world and then we have this and this, right? So the fact that you felt comfortable enough to just go in and you're like, well, fuck it, I'll figure it out, right? like
Well, the funny thing is that it took me like I had my channel and I started it. Also, have you heard me play D&D? I kind of just jump into things.
that's true. That is true. Yeah.
a thing of jelly, if we will.
Yeah.
Finish your question. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good. You're good. Like you can continue on your train of thought.
It took until COVID.
Mm.
When COVID started, I had nothing else to do, so I was just like, well, let's just actually do it. Because I started the channel, I had done one or two things. I was more comfortable on Matt and James's channel, And then I was just like, I'm too busy doing shows. So at that point I was doing 4 or 5 shows a month, and I was producing my own show that was once a month. So just like having to do all those things, like
that's a lot.
Costumes, hair, making sure that I was okay. And then, you know, I basically had just started my transition process back into medically back in 2019. So it was laser hair removal and getting insurance on. So I mentally wasn't necessarily at that place where I can just be like, all right, let's also start a Twitch stream until COVID hit. And I was just sitting there like, don't know if I'm gonna still be bartending. I don't know where shows are coming from. I'm not really sure where my paycheck is coming from. So I have my laptop, I have my iPad, and I plugged in and started doing 3 times a week just drawing before I even started video games.
That's great.
And that was hard to figure. Just trying to figure out how to get the iPad onto the OBS, like it took me a good minute to figure out.
All those tutorials are like, oh, it's easy. You just plug it in, you drag it here, and you're good to go. And then you, like, 3 hours later, you're like, which one's the lightning cable again? It's like, it's like it never works out the way that it says it is. And it's just so frustrating. Like, I can't tell you. A couple, actually, tangent time. Like last week, I was working on our Jeep, and I bought a roof rack for it. So we're trying to install this roof rack, and we have to like drill into the fucking thing and like cut up pieces on it. And like, I'm terrified because this is a brand new Jeep, and I'm talking to my fiance.
And you have to drill. You have to start there and drill holes.
I'm like looking at my fiance. I'm like, do you really want me to get the Dremel and cut the fender? You want me to? Oh, okay, right. And like all the tutorials are like, it's great, it's super fun. You'll be done in like 2 hours. What? So we're on our 3rd week of trying to work on this thing, and it's still not done. Like I have like random pipes sticking out from the roof of it that need to be attached to the roof rack in the back. And I'm just like, I still need to drill holes in the back bumper that I just installed. Like, so it's a brand new bumper that now I need to drill new holes into, and it's 1/2-inch thick steel. And I'm like, how am I supposed to do that with my fucking like battery powered drill? Like, I'm just like, this sucks, man. And now we're getting a heat wave, so it's like 100 degrees outside, sitting there with the power drill. It's just, oh my gosh, I melted 5 drill bits in a row. Melted.
Wait, that's possible?
Yeah, all right. So I found out the hard way that you're supposed to not really put pressure on it. Like you want to just kind of hold it. And I was at the point of about to just yell at something and maybe break. And so I was just like, you motherfucker, you're getting in, you're making this goddamn hole. And I'm just like putting all my weight behind it. And then all of a sudden you just hear, and like the drill bit disappears. I'm like, okay, like I just bought this yesterday, but sure, that's fine.
That's hilarious and awful all at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it looks good. It's getting there, and when it's done, it's done. And however long it took, that's just how long it took us for it to do it, right? Like, but yeah,
I'm just at that point where like, just someone give me that good Marvel money, and I'll let people do things for me.
Right? That'd be really nice. But you need to find yourself. You find yourself either get yourself in the movies or find yourself a man from the movies, whichever one's easier.
Chris Evans, can you hear me?
We'll put that energy out there for you. Come on, Chris Evans. You know you got to get over here. We'll have him on the show. We'll have you back, and then we'll get you guys together, right? I think it's a good plan. We'll have the 3 Chris's. It'll be great. The 3 Chris's and Fraya.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Why not, right?
Exactly.
Sorry, I'm off on tangent land. So, I've stolen the show like from Chris completely for a way too long time. You want to just throw something out? Like, you've been the casual
very
listener
quiet.
Right now. Yeah,
I'm honestly just chilling right now. It's just fun listening. I mean, I think you kind of said what I wanted to say. That's why it was like,
my bad.
It's all good.
I go off.
I'm just chilling
hard sometimes.
No, it's all good. I've been a little distracted. Sorry, I've been listening, but like my dog's been kind of like.
Oh, I totally understand.
Yeah, I've been like trying to like calm him down a little bit because it's a little warm in here. But yeah.
Okay, so then I have a question.
Oh, okay.
Just because it popped into my head.
Yeah.
I don't want to necessarily assume. I'm guessing that you guys are straight.
Yes. Well, I am.
I'm not.
He's not.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm guessing that Chris is the reason that you started listening to Queens of Adventure.
No, I got him into it.
You got into it. How did you find it?
Okay, here's my little guilty pleasure. I absolutely fucking love drag. I love it. My fiance, she got me into it. Like one day.
Don't tell me.
Like
RuPaul's Drag Race?
yeah. Yeah. I've seen every single episode multiple times. I can't wait for the All-Star season to come out pretty soon here in like 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, no, I honestly, up until like I guess like I heard All Stars, I was kind of a little dragged out because literally RuPaul's Drag Race season, whatever it was, I feel like it was 7, but it's not. And then it was All Stars, and then from All Stars it was UK. From UK it was like back to the regular season, and then now it's down. No, it's back to UK, and now it's down under, and now they're doing RuPaul's Drag Race España. They're doing, I think, Italy too.
Yeah, Valentina's in España, right? Yeah.
And then there's also the 2 seasons of Dragula that came out in 2 consecutive years. So it was just like, all right, I'm good.
Yeah.
Who won? Cool. Yeah. That's all I care about. And then I saw the All Stars cast, and well, I decided to just watch the first, like the entrances. And as soon as Kylie Sonique Love came out, I like my job. I was taking care of kids, and I screamed at the top of my lungs. And the kids freaked out, and I was like, "Don't worry about it. Everything's fine."
Yeah. Now, I mean, drag is such an amazing thing to me, and I love hearing the stories of how it was used to help, like, you know, get through all these horrible ordeals that people have gone through, and basically just find out your true self and be comfortable with who you are. I mean, so in high school and for about 8 years, I wrestled the whole time, and I was always there, like constantly cutting weight, and like, I had to stay at 119 always, but my natural weight was around like 140. So I grew up having pretty bad body issues, and to this day, I still am very uncomfortable. Like, I work out almost every day now, but I have to make sure I have a hoodie on no matter what the weather is, because I just don't feel comfortable doing it. But
R.I.P. your body, like hydration, in the middle of summer.
I sweat buckets. It's horrible. It's disgusting. I can wring out all my clothes at the end of it. It's bad. And like the coaches that I work out with, they're like, "Do you want to take that off?" I'm just like, "No, I'm good." Like, I'm okay. Just like dripping while just doing a plank, and it's just a fucking fountain coming off my face. But so like, I'm starting to get better at that, and I have to say, a lot of it has to do with like people like you, Fraya. Like, I love the fact that you are just so genuinely you and unapologetically you, and it's a beautiful thing that I really want to incorporate into my own life. And I feel like that's something that isn't just for, you know, LGBTQ communities or just like drag culture in general. Like, that's something that we all should be taking in, is our own personal love of ourselves and being able to just accept you, right? And just be happy with what you got and be excited for what you may get, right? Like, okay, cool. Like, maybe you have goals to lose weight in the future, but treat that as like a bonus. It's like, yeah, I love me, and now I'm me plus one, right? Like, I'm now Super Saiyan 2 version of myself. I just got out of the hyperbolic time chamber, and I'm better now, right? Like, it's
exactly,
you get to evolve yourself, but in the meantime, enjoy the journey and love the process, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's one of those things where I didn't understand, because I will tell you right now, I had the same issue. Like, I was overweight as a kid. I was my biggest bully. It's all mostly mental. And, you know, I looked great in my 20s. I didn't believe it. But there was a completely different battle that I was fighting that I didn't understand until, we're going to get a little dark. My fiance at the time has bipolar disorder, and I was one I wasn't responsible for it, but I made myself responsible for putting his pills in his thing. And he took lithium at the time, like an insane amount. The doctors had to put him on. And this is after we'd gotten engaged. We moved out of the city. Show started slowing down, because if you're not living in the city, you somewhat become irrelevant, because it's harder to get to you, and you have to actually make plans to like figure out how to get there.
Right.
And I went from doing drag and being in makeup and women's clothing 3 to 4 times a week to maybe once every 2 weeks. And I didn't understand why I was so unhappy, and like I was still working, I was still doing shows. What's going on? And it wasn't until I had that handful of pills and a really bad thought in my head that it clicked. Like, this isn't who you are. This isn't who you're supposed to be. And I kind of started figuring, and that's like that whole mental of like, are you transgender? Are you this? Because I'd always just kind of stuck with myself that like, you're just a tomboy stuck in a gay guy's body. So like, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine. Turns out, no, I wasn't. And then once I started going through that journey, I slowly but surely started to accept my body the way it was. It's not perfect, but I don't be mad if I'm walking out in short shorts and a crop top
Right.
in my 30s. And it took a lot of time to get there. So yeah, going back to representation, had I known and had I seen more people like myself, I probably would have gotten there a lot quicker than waiting until I was 30 and not knowing what exactly was going on in my head, not understanding. Because even when I did befriend a bunch of trans women in my early 20s, I wasn't thinking about that at the time. And that's just that.
Right. Wow. That's crazy. I mean, thank you so much for sharing that. We really appreciate that. Like, sharing that bit of your life with us. But yeah, I mean, I feel like with media, we definitely need to have more of a representation of all facets of life like that. So it does become more normalized, and not just normalized or acceptable, but more of like a side thought in your mind where like, oh, well, it could be this, right? Like in the movies and all that, like you mentioned, right? Like, oh, I'm just a tomboy stuck in a gay boy body, right? Like, that idea is seen in media. Like the tomboy is a normal, trope that's used constantly in movies, films, games, all that, right? But like, maybe that's why in your mind, and this is just me speculating and kind of trying to make connections here, but
you're probably correct.
Right, but like, put it together where like, that's why that was the only idea in your mind at the time, right? And it did in the future, whenever like you started getting more familiar with trans community and involving yourself more with it, and it became more part of your vocabulary, that's whenever you started putting those mental connections together and being like, well, no, it's actually this, right?
Right.
So,
well, that and a whole like slew of like Catholicism and like things like that, and like there was even random thoughts like in my head where I was like, you know what, maybe I'll just wait till my parents are dead and then I'll do it.
Oh wow.
So you are correct.
Are your parents Catholic and Mexican?
My mother
Catholic?
is.
Okay.
Yes.
In Mexican. Okay. Yeah.
How did you know it was Mexican?
If I could turn my camera, I'll do it at the end. I have a 5 foot tall painting of Frida Kahlo staring at me right now.
You better work.
Like it's but no, trust me. I have a Mexican Catholic mother-in-law who has done some very interesting things when it comes to using religion in weird ways. Like getting an exorcism for your punk rock daughter because she dyed her hair and now she's the devil,
Yeah,
those things happen.
Yeah.
So, but it's crazy and unfortunate, in my opinion, that it takes so long still in this day. I mean, it's 2021. Like, come on. Like, we've gone through so much crap already, and we have made such serious leaps and bounds to get where we are now. And like, we're still not hitting the right areas. Like, we're just treating the people who are speaking the loudest, not the ones who are kind of afraid to speak up for themselves. Right. And so I feel like with taking it back to gaming and all that, because, gaming podcast a little bit,
yes.
a lot of indie games now are starting to incorporate those little stories and tropes into their central themes, which is amazing and beautiful. Like Chris has mentioned multiple times, Celeste in the past, where that game is not just about depression, but it's also about coming out, right? And then like climbing the mountain and dealing with that whole ordeal of its own sense, and kind of normalizing it and bring it more towards the forefront is such a beautiful thing. But I still have a problem with it. And my one problem is that all the themes center around a negative emotion, whether it be depression or some sort of hatred or anger. Like, why can't we have a game now? Like, sure, Soldier 76 in Overwatch is supposedly gay, but they don't put that in any of the lore. They don't put that anywhere. Like, why can't we just have an openly gay, like, badass fucking character with a gun doing his thing, right? And like,
Right.
and make it not even like where it has to be mentioned in the story. It's just there. Like, so
Right.
many times when it's represented in games, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, they're the gay couple, right? Like, it's so like they get like so many like extra just time on screen just to create that message, like, oh, we're inclusive, but really, is that being inclusive or just putting a stamp on it, right? Or like putting a band-aid
Right.
on the problem, where it would be more meaningful if just the main character was just openly queer or whatever, right? And it wasn't like fully explained with a full backstory of like, oh, she went through a crazy ordeal and had to climb through a cave and defeat the whale wizard or whatever crap to find herself, and she realized that she loves herself and the partner that she was with the whole time, right? No, like, they don't need that. So I'm hopeful that games in the near future will start to see that the way that they're theming it, while yes, it is very helpful and it's beautiful and it is really pushing the medium in the right direction, it's not necessary, and it needs to be more of just like a normalized theme, right?
Right.
And maybe that will help out people in the future who went through similar ordeals as you did to realize these things faster, and easier, to make their life that much easier in the future, right? Like, that's kind of like the hope and the
Absolutely.
dream. So we're kind of creeping up on time here, but I really want to like ask you, do you have
You
any...
mean it's not 3.5 hours long? We're not going to sit here and
We
just
don't do full
chit-chat for,
D&D
like...
sessions, unfortunately, but I will say this as a little caveat before we like jump off. I would love to have you back on the show again, and definitely have you on for other shows that we might be producing in the near future that I think you would be excited for as well, if you
I
would
would
be.
absolutely love to.
Great. That's wonderful to hear. But before we hop off, I really want to just kind of give you the stage for a moment to just say what you need to the fans, to the audience, of like, if there's anything you want to share with them, any like kind words or anything like that you want to just kind of put a good message out there for them.
Well, thank you guys so much for following the show, for following me and the rest of the cast. It is, I guess, in this sense, it's very hard to find storytelling podcasts or any sort of like thing that either represents you, especially something that is, you know, for and plus non-binary and trans people of color telling a story. You don't really see that. It's mostly very either whitewashed, or you don't see very many people of color. So Queens of Adventure has meant a lot to me in the last I think 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah.
So, you know, thank you guys so much for coming on this journey. Thank you guys so much for following me and everyone else in the cast. Let me see if I can name everybody.
We'll just do a robot voiceover of everyone's name at the end.
Right. Butelino Kipple, London Bradshaw, Arseniki, Bosco, Irene Dubois, and of course, we cannot forget Scarlett O'Hara.
Mm-hmm.
I almost called her Scarlett O'Hara.
I think you've called her that many times on the show, so yeah.
So yeah, it was a labor of love. I really had a great time doing it. So yeah, thank you guys so much.
Yeah, awesome. And we actually do something in the beginning of the show, but I wanted to kind of put it as a bookend, and it's what I like to call our little joyous plugs. Just something really simple, something to kind of put a little bit more positivity out there in the world. And it's really just, is there something this week that you've gotten excited about, something that's made you happy, or just something like, it could be media, it could be personal life, it could just be just some sort of happiness you want to throw out there in the world?
I finally got actual furniture in my apartment. I hung up my paintings. My kitchen is like, nice. My dining room area is done. It looks like someone actually lives here now.
That's awesome.
So that's actually, like, now that you mention it, that's like my little like piece of mind.
That's a huge accomplishment, something to be super excited for. Like, that's such a weight lifted off your shoulders whenever you get to that point where it's like, oh yeah, there's stuff hanging on the walls now. It's home, right?
Yes.
That's beautiful.
It's nice.
Beautiful. What about you, Chris? Do you have anything that you want to throw out there into the audience, into the universe real quick?
Honestly, I've just been like super busy. I've been playing a lot of games. I've been really bad and just started binging a bunch, but I've been really addicted to the new Ratchet and Clank a lot, so that's where all my attention is
It's so adorable.
lately. I'm blown away by it. It's the graphics. It feels like I'm playing like a Pixar, like not Pixar, but like the 3D aspect, like where it's that really lifelike, smooth. I'm like, whoa, this feels like I'm playing a movie, but like, I don't know, it's cool. It makes me excited to see like, where we're going with games, like to make it more realistic and more, I don't know, I guess expressive in a sense with styles, but I don't know. I just been stuck on that mostly. Working on some other stuff too, but yeah.
Nice. And for me, just a quick and simple one, I want to just throw out there, listen to Queens of Adventure, damn it. It's an amazing show out there. It's really enjoyable. It's really fun. Even if you don't know what D&D is or you don't know any of the mechanics behind it, it is such an exciting, fun, just eventful show that you just never know what you're going to get. So be sure to give it a listen. I actually re-listened to it the last couple of weeks again for like the 5th time because I like listening to it while running. But so really appreciate everything that you do, Fraya. Thank you so much again for being on here. And it really, really, really means the world to us. And we are excited to share your stories with everyone out there and kind of get your name out there more. It's more fun. But where can they find you? What's your handles on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, all that fun stuff?
Literally, they are all the same. Fraya, FRAYA_LOVE.
Easy. You got lucky there.
Nice.
Got really lucky there. All right. So thank you guys so much for listening this week. It's going to do it for us. And yeah, well, enjoy your life out there. Have fun, everybody. And bye.
Bye.
Bye.